While most billionaire homes are architectural masterpieces, some of them feel more like overfunded fever dreams. Let's rank the wildest homes of the world's richest people in a tier list that's equal parts luxury, logic, and what the hell. Mark Zuckerberg's Hawaiian compound. When Mark Zuckerberg decided to extend his real estate portfolio to Hawaii, he practically bought what amounted to a small country. We're talking thousands of acres, complete with 2 mansions, over a dozen smaller homes, and even a self-sustaining underground bunker for those just-in-case billionaire moments. There's also a network of futuristic disc-shaped tree houses, all connected by rope bridges, which sounds like something out of an eco-sci-fi film. But while this compound is deeply private and secure, it's still a little bit intense. There's something slightly dystopian about the idea of one man carving out his own digital age fiefdom in the middle of paradise. It's impressive, sure, but not necessarily the kind of place you'd describe as warm or inviting. For that reason, Zuck's jungle fortress lands in B tier, over-engineered, slightly eerie, but undeniably high-spec. Elon Musk's $50,000 tiny home. Now, technically, this one's not even a full-fledged house, but more of a statement. After selling off a $100 million real estate portfolio, Elon Musk claimed he wanted to simplify his life. So, he bought a $50,000 prefabricated tiny home in South Texas, which he mostly uses as a guest house. However, it's less billionaire simplicity and more prepper energy with a trust fund. Musk said possessions weigh people down, and sure, that's one perspective. But when 0.05% of your net worth still buys more than most people will ever own, the whole minimalist act starts to look more like an elaborate PR experiment. There's something oddly respectable about choosing a life with fewer things. But let's be honest, this sounds more like austerity cosplay rather than innovation. For us, that makes it a D-tier house, not only because it's not really the luxurious kind, but also because there might be a hidden PR agenda behind it. Larry Ellison's Island of Lanai. When Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle, got tired of just buying properties, he bought an entire island. In 2012, he dropped over $300 million to purchase 98% of Lanai, a Hawaiian island with around 3,000 residents. But contrary to popular belief, it wasn't just a billionaire flex. Ellison has poured even more into rebuilding it, turning the island into a green energy haven and luxury wellness hub, complete with hydroponic farms, 4 Seasons resorts, and a private airport. While he technically has his own mansion there as well, it's basically the entire island that's his house now. Think about it. If you own the land, the utilities, the hotels, and the infrastructure, you're not just living in luxury, you're practically running it. It's the real estate equivalent of beating Monopoly with one move. And so, this one comfortably lands in the S tier. Saudi Crown Prince's Chateau in France. When your weekend getaway has a moat and an aquarium under it, you're operating in rare air. The Saudi Crown Prince's $300 million French chateau is the kind of place that makes Versailles look budget. Despite appearing historic, it was actually built in 2009 and was completed with a private nightclub, gold finishes, and a tech system that lets you control everything with an iPhone. Want to turn on the fountains while dimming the disco ball and ordering champagne from a drone? There's probably a button for that as well. On paper, it's absurd, but in execution, it's flawless. It blends medieval cosplay with ultra-modern tech, which is either genius or completely unhinged, possibly both. The only reason it doesn't get bumped to S tier is that it feels more like a billionaire theme park than a living home. Still, the attention to detail, absurd luxury, and Bond villain energy make this a rock-solid A-tier mansion. El Chapo's network of safe houses. This El Chapo safe house network is so bad, if there was ever a list of the most unlivable billionaire houses, it would certainly top that. At the peak of his empire, El Chapo was worth $12 billion and technically owned more real estate than most hedge funds. He had a house at every beach, a ranch in every state, and yet, he couldn't actually live in any of them. Thanks to the whole world's most wanted situation, he spent most of his time laying low in discreet, windowless safe houses. There's no denying the scale of his holdings, but when you can't enjoy a single sunset without worrying about a DEA raid, it's hard to call that luxury. Creative use of space? Maybe, but luxury? Not even close. Let's place it in the D tier. Bill Gates' Xanadu 2, Washington. When you have $150 million to spend on a home and you're Bill Gates, you build a smart house so advanced it basically runs itself. Nicknamed Xanadu 2, this mansion in Washington has all the billionaire essentials. A trampoline room, walls covered in screens, a 60-foot swimming pool with an underwater sound system, and even a personal Caribbean beach imported grain by grain. But while the house is tech-forward and deeply functional, it's got a certain coldness to it. It feels more like a corporate R&D campus than a place where you'd lounge in your robe. It's not exactly cozy, but it's still brilliant. This is the kind of house where you admire the engineering more than the atmosphere, and for that balance, we'll place it comfortably in B tier. Steve Jobs' Jackling House. This one's less about the house itself and more about how passionately it was hated. Back in 1984, Steve Jobs bought the historic Jackling House in California, an elegant Spanish colonial revival built in 1925 by a famous architect for a wealthy copper baron. Jobs took one look at this carefully preserved landmark and basically declared it garbage. He went on record trashing the original owner's taste and calling the architect a nobody. His dream was to bulldoze the place and start fresh. But California's Historical Commission had other ideas, blocking him from demolition. So, Jobs did the next best thing. He let it rot. For 10 years, the house sat abandoned, falling apart under his ownership. Eventually, he got the green light to destroy it, and did so less than a year before his death. It's not that the house was awful, it's that Jobs waged a vendetta against it. D tier for pettiness alone. Jeff Bezos' Miami megamansions. In 2023, Bezos ditched Washington for a man-made island off the coast of Miami because when you're worth over $150 billion, you buy the entire neighborhood instead of a single house. First, he grabbed a $68 million waterfront mansion. Then 2 months later, he picked up the one next door for another $79 million, as casually as if he was buying extra parking spaces. It's luxurious without being cartoonish. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling glass, infinity pools, and the kind of ocean view that makes your net worth feel like it just doubled. Also, Florida has no state income tax, which might be the most billionaire move of all. Not only is it peaceful and practical, but it's also perfectly positioned for someone who wants to swim laps, avoid the IRS, and still get groceries delivered in under 30 minutes. While it lacks the showiness of an S-tier palace, this is strategic luxury at its finest. Easy A tier. Jeff Bezos' former Washington mansion. Before his Miami tax exile and space cowboy rebrand, Jeff Bezos lived in a relatively modest $10 million mansion in Washington, D.C. This place was where Amazon went from a garage project to global empire. It's elegant and full of classic East Coast charm. Think exposed brick, carved wood, libraries with sliding ladders, that kind of vibe. Compared to his newer mega mansions, this home feels almost humble. There's something oddly admirable about how practical it was, at least by billionaire standards. It wasn't screaming for attention, it just quietly did its job as a launchpad to global domination. That said, it lacks the jaw-dropping features we see in higher-tier homes. No moats or bunkers, or the state-of-the-art cyber trees. Just a really nice house for a really rich guy on the rise. That earns it a respectable spot in the B tier. Vladimir Putin's secret palace. The thing about Vladimir Putin's rumored $1.3 billion mega palace is that we're not even entirely sure where it begins or ends both literally and politically. Nestled on the Russian coast of the Black Sea, the estate is said to span over 190,000 square feet, complete with an underground ice hockey rink, amphitheater, vineyard, hookah lounge, and, yes, an underground bunker. It's less house and more shadow government headquarters. The place is so shrouded in secrecy that videos of it sparked protests, documentaries, and international investigations. Allegedly, it's funded by a shell game of state money and loyal oligarchs, but like everything surrounding Putin, that matter is also a bit complicated. What's undeniable, though, is that it's over-the-top, fortified, and engineered to survive a literal war. You don't build an estate like this unless you plan to outlast empires. It's the kind of home you flee to, not from. Paranoid? Maybe. Powerful? Absolutely. No question, this is a certain S tier. Larry Page's Island Experiments. Co-founder of Google, Larry Page, has 5 private islands to his name. You heard it right, and that's the 5 that we know of. And while he keeps most details under wraps, what little has leaked out paints a picture that's part scientific utopia, part supervillain hideout. Locals have spotted helicopters and restricted areas, and Page once hinted at building a lawless testing ground for experimental ideas that can't be done anywhere else. Translation: human trials, AI labs, underground biotech bunkers? No one really knows. But the idea that a billionaire could carve out his own unregulated sandbox somewhere in the Pacific is both fascinating and mildly terrifying. It's like if Richard Branson got way more into mad science than marketing. Whether it's genius or deeply questionable, you've got to respect the scale of ambition. He didn't just build a mansion, he went full civilization mode. That's S-tier innovation wrapped in mystery and rare luxury. Kim Kardashian's minimalist monastery. When Kim Kardashian and Kanye West bought their Calabasas home, they spent years turning it into what they described as a minimalist monastery. The result? A giant, echo-filled structure with white walls, zero furniture, and the comforting warmth of a dentist's office. Bought for $20 million back in 2014, this residential is basically an art installation that may look cool in photos, but it's hard to imagine curling up on the couch when the couch looks like it belongs in a museum and might collapse if you breathe on it wrong. Some called it avant-garde, others called it an expensive psych ward. In all honesty, it's definitely an aesthetic statement, but one that prioritizes concept over comfort. There's no denying the vision. Kim clearly has an eye for design, but as far as actual living goes, it feels more like a house tour than a home. Intriguing, yes. Comfortable? Not really, and that makes it a C-tier creation. King Charles's Buckingham Palace. You can't talk about billionaire homes without mentioning the crown jewel Buckingham Palace. Technically owned by the British monarchy, this $5 billion estate is still one of the most opulent, iconic, and historically soaked residences on Earth. With 775 rooms, including 78 bathrooms, a private post office, ballroom, throne room, and London's largest private garden, the palace isn't just a home, it's a living institution. It even has its own ATM in the basement. The scale is outrageous, but the vibe is more state museum with staff in gloves than a cozy weekend hangout. Still, it's a rare place where luxury meets legacy, and somehow it all just fits together perfectly. From priceless art collections to the sheer weight of tradition, Buckingham is the gold standard of stately living. This place has been making even the richest feel broke since 1703. That alone earns it a pristine S-tier spot. And that was our tier list of some of the most unique houses owned by billionaires. What do you think of this ranking? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button if you enjoyed the ride, and subscribe for more wild luxury stories from the world of sports and celebrity. Until next time, live legendary.